Luna Harrison stood at the viewport of her weathered cargo ship, the Rusty Nail, watching the mysterious world of Kepler 7 grow larger in her view. The planet's surface was a maze of crystalline structures that caught the light of its twin suns, creating a dazzling display that had earned it the nickname, the Diamond Grave, among space travelers. But Luna wasn't here for the view. Another maintenance request from beings who think too much, she muttered, reviewing the holographic brief floating before her. The Galactic Council had spent centuries trying to unlock the secrets of the ancestral fountain, a mysterious piece of technology left behind by a civilization so advanced they had simply vanished without explanation 50 millennia ago. The ship's AI chimed in with its usual dry humor. Probability of success according to Council archives, 0.0024%. Shall I prepare your favorite "I told you so" speech for the return journey? Luna smiled, adjusting her worn leather tool belt. Save it, Rust. I have a feeling about this one. She had built her reputation on fixing the unfixable, though the Council's xenoarchaeologists and theoretical physicists often dismissed her methods as primitive. They preferred their quantum algorithms and probability matrices to her hands-on approach. As the Rusty Nail descended through the atmosphere, Luna caught her first glimpse of the ancient city. Twisted spires of what appeared to be living crystal reached toward the sky, their surfaces etched with mathematical patterns that seemed to shift when viewed directly. At the city's heart stood her target, the ancestral fountain. Even from a distance, it was breathtaking. A spiraling column of crystalline material rose nearly 100 meters into the air, its surface decorated with what appeared to be liquid light frozen in mid-flow. The fountain had been silent for 50,000 years, but Luna could almost hear the music it must have made when active. Her landing was met by a delegation of council representatives. First among them was Ambassador Vexthor of the Syntheti, his metallic exoskeleton gleaming in the double sunlight. Beside him stood Director Phyla of the Quantum Collective, her energy form contained within a sophisticated environmental suit. Engineer Harrison, Vexthor's voice was carefully modulated to hide what Luna suspected was disdain. We appreciate your prompt response to our request, though I must admit some surprise at the Council's choice of operative. Luna unloaded her toolkit from the cargo hold, the battered metal box a sharp contrast to the sleek technology surrounding her. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one, Ambassador. I understand you've tried everything else. Phyla's energy form flickered with what might have been amusement. We have applied every known scientific principle. The fountain's operational mechanics defy our most advanced theoretical models. Its power source appears to violate several laws of physics. Maybe that's the problem, Luna said, approaching the base of the fountain. You're looking for complexity when the answer might be simple. She reached out to touch the surface, ignoring the startled gasps from the delegation. The material was warm under her fingers, and there was something familiar about the pattern of grooves that ran along its base. Please exercise caution, Vexthor warned. The last attempt to interface directly with the structure resulted in the complete molecular dissolution of a leading xenoarchaeologist. Luna nodded absently, her attention focused on what her hands were telling her. The patterns weren't random as the Council's reports had suggested. They were systematic, repeating in a way that reminded her of something she'd seen before. Tell me, she said, walking slowly around the base, has anyone ever tried treating this not as an advanced piece of technology, but as a simple machine that's just stopped working? The silence that followed was almost comical. Luna could practically hear the advanced minds around her struggling with the concept. She pulled an old mechanical stethoscope from her toolkit, a tool so ancient that several of the delegates didn't even recognize it. As she pressed it against different points on the fountain's surface, her suspicions grew stronger. There was a rhythm to the way the crystal responded to pressure, a pattern that seemed almost mechanical. Ambassador, Luna said, unable to keep the excitement from her voice, I think I know what we're dealing with here. This isn't some mystical device operating on unknown principles. It's a machine, albeit an incredibly sophisticated one. And like any machine, it has moving parts that can wear down, get stuck, or need maintenance. The delegation exchanged skeptical looks, but Luna was already pulling more tools from her kit. She had a theory, and if she was right, the solution might be far simpler than anyone had imagined. The real question was whether the council representatives would let her test it before their preconceptions about proper scientific procedure got in the way. As she set up her equipment, Luna couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the greatest mysteries in the universe had the simplest solutions, you just had to be willing to get your hands dirty to find them. Luna's fingers traced the intricate patterns on the fountain's surface while the assembled council delegates watched with barely concealed anxiety. The twin suns of Kepler 7 had begun to set, casting long shadows across the crystalline cityscape and bathing everything in a surreal purple twilight. "Impossible," muttered Director Phyla, her energy form fluctuating rapidly. "Our quantum scanners detected no such mechanical elements within the structure. The technology is far too advanced for such primitive principles." Luna pulled out an old fabric cloth from her toolkit and began cleaning a section of the fountain's base, revealing deeper etchings beneath millennia of accumulated debris. "With respect, Director, that's exactly why you've all missed it. You're looking for quantum signatures and zero-point energy fluctuations when the answer is literally written on the surface." Ambassador Vexthor's metallic appendages clicked in agitation. "Explain yourself, Engineer Harrison. What exactly do you believe you found?" Luna stood, wiping her hands on her coveralls. "These patterns aren't just decorative. They're maintenance instructions, written in a universal language, mathematics. The ancestors who built this weren't trying to hide their secrets, they were leaving a manual for future generations." She pointed to a series of spiral patterns that wound their way around the fountain's base. "See these? They're not random. They're a sequence, showing how the internal mechanisms should move. It's basically a blueprint, hidden in plain sight because everyone was too busy looking for something more complicated." A new voice joined the conversation, Professor Exxon of the Temporal Sciences Division, his chronal field causing slight distortions in the air around him. "You suggest the ancestors, a civilization capable of manipulating the fabric of space-time itself, would use such basic principles? Why not?" Luna challenged, pulling out her diagnostic tablet. "The most enduring technologies are often the simplest. A wheel is still a wheel, whether it's on an ancient cart or a quantum transport." She connected her tablet to various points around the fountain's base, setting up a basic resonance scan. The tablet's screen came alive with data, but not the kind the council scientists were used to seeing. Instead of quantum signatures and energy matrices, it showed simple mechanical vibrations, harmonics, and stress patterns. "Look here," Luna pointed to the display. "The fountain isn't powered by some mysterious energy source. It's powered by the planet itself, seismic vibrations, tidal forces, thermal gradients. All those natural rhythms feed into a mechanical system so perfectly designed it's kept itself partially operational for 50,000 years." The assembled delegates crowded around her tablet, their various sensory organs struggling to process what they were seeing. The data was undeniable, yet it challenged everything they thought they knew about the ancestors' technology. "But the molecular reconstruction capabilities," Phyla protested, "the atmospheric manipulation, the terraforming effects, how could simple mechanics achieve such results?" Luna smiled, reaching for another tool from her kit. "The same way a tiny gear in a watch can drive complex movements. It's all about multiplication of force and perfect timing. The ancestors didn't break the laws of physics, they just understood them so well they could work within them perfectly." She began setting up a series of small devices around the fountain's base, each one calibrated to measure and match the natural frequencies she'd detected. The fountain isn't broken because something complicated failed. It's stuck because the simplest part of the mechanism, the initial driver that starts the whole process, has been immobilized by time and debris. "And you believe you can restart it?" Vexthor's tone carried equal parts skepticism and hope. I don't just believe it, Luna said, making final adjustments to her equipment. I'm going to prove it. But first, I need to show you something else I found, something that might explain why the ancestors disappeared, and why this fountain is more important than anyone realized. She pulled up a new set of images on her tablet, showing a pattern that repeated throughout the fountain's design. As the delegates gathered closer, their expressions changed from dismissal to astonishment. Hidden within the mechanical instructions was another message, one that had been waiting 50,000 years to be discovered by someone who knew how to look for the obvious instead of the obscure. The dying light of the twin suns caught the fountain's crystalline surface, and for a moment, Luna could have sworn she saw something move within its depths. She was close to understanding the full truth, but she knew that the next step would be the most dangerous, and the most likely to be opposed by the council representatives who still clung to their preconceptions about how advanced technology should work. Absolutely not. Ambassador Vexthor's metallic exoskeleton rattled with agitation. What you're proposing violates every safety protocol the Council has established for handling ancestral artifacts. Luna stood her ground, the holographic schematics she decoded floating between her and the assembled delegates. The third sun of Kepler 7 was rising now, casting everything in a deep crimson glow that made the crystalline structures around them look like they were bleeding. Your protocols, she said firmly, are exactly why this fountain has remained dormant for 50 millennia. Sometimes you have to break the rules to fix what's broken. Professor Exxon's temporal field crackled with anxiety. The risk is unacceptable. If you're wrong, the resonance cascade could destabilize the entire planetary crust. And if I'm right, Luna countered, we'll understand why the ancestors left this behind, and why they wanted someone to find it. She pulled up another section of the decoded instructions, highlighting a series of interlocking patterns. Look at this. These aren't just mechanical blueprints. They're a warning. Director Phyla's energy form pulsed with interest despite her skepticism. A warning? About what? Luna manipulated the hologram, expanding a section that showed a repeating sequence. The ancestors didn't just vanish, they left. And they left this fountain as both a test and a message for whoever was clever enough to understand it. She reached into her toolkit and pulled out what looked like an ancient hand crank, the kind that might have started primitive combustion engines centuries ago. The delegate stared at it in confusion. You can't be serious, Vexthor exclaimed. You intend to restart a piece of ancestral technology with that? Sometimes the old ways are the best ways, Luna said, approaching the fountain's base. The ancestors built this to respond to simple mechanical input because they knew that any civilization advanced enough to understand complexity might have forgotten the beauty of simplicity. She began attaching the crank to a point she'd discovered earlier, matching the geometric patterns that served as a lock. They weren't looking for the most advanced civilization to find this, they were looking for one wise enough to see past advancement to understanding. This is madness, Professor Exxon declared, his temporal field fluctuating wildly. I must contact the council for an emergency intervention. Luna knew she had minutes at most before they stopped her. She quickly attached the last of her resonance meters to the fountain's base, each one calibrated to measure the harmonics she'd discovered. The ancestors left because they found something out there in the darkness between galaxies. Something that made them run. But they didn't want to abandon the younger races entirely. Her hands moved swiftly, making final adjustments. This fountain isn't just a terraforming device, it's a key. A test to see if we're ready for what they left behind. Ready for what? Phyla asked, her energy form dimming with concern. Luna's hands gripped the crank. That's what we're about to find out. Before anyone could stop her, she began to turn the handle. The ancient mechanism resisted at first, 50,000 years of stillness fighting against motion. Then, with a sound like crystals singing, something deep within the fountain shifted. The ground beneath them trembled. The crystalline structures around them began to resonate, creating a harmony that seemed to pierce through to the soul. Light began to pulse through the fountain's internal chambers, following patterns that hadn't been seen since before humans had mastered fire. "By the eternal void," Vexthor whispered, his metallic form vibrating in resonance with the fountain's awakening. "What have you done?" Luna continued cranking, matching her rhythm to the pulses of light. "I'm doing what the ancestors intended. I'm proving that sometimes the greatest wisdom isn't in knowing how to make things more complex, it's in remembering how to keep them simple." The fountain's crystal structure began to shift, sections rotating and realigning themselves like the world's most elaborate puzzle box. With each turn of the crank, new patterns emerged, and with them, new harmonics that seemed to reach deep into the planet's core. Streams of what looked like liquid light began to flow upward through the fountain's channels, defying gravity but following perfectly rational mechanical principles. The delegates backed away in awe and fear as the device that had puzzled their greatest minds for centuries came to life under the ministrations of a human with a simple crank. But Luna knew this was just the beginning. As the fountain systems fully engaged, she could see something forming in the column of light above them, a message left by the ancestors, waiting for someone who understood that the most profound truths often hide behind the simplest facades. The real question was whether the galaxy was ready for what that message contained. The column of light rising from the fountain pierced the crimson sky of Kepler 7, transforming into a cascade of images that surrounded Luna and the stunned council delegates. The crystalline structures of the ancient city resonated in harmony, creating a symphony of light and sound that seemed to reach into the depths of space itself. "Impossible," Professor Exxon whispered, his temporal field perfectly still for the first time since Luna had met him. "The energy readings, they're completely stable." "But how?" Luna released the hand crank, which continued turning on its own now, driven by the natural harmonics she had initialized. "Because the ancestors understood something we'd forgotten, the universe itself operates on rhythm and resonance. They didn't try to force their will upon it, they learned to dance with it." The images coalescing in the light above them began to take shape, star maps, diagrams, and finally, figures that looked almost humanoid, but with an ethereal quality that suggested beings of pure energy. The ancestors themselves. "A recording," Ambassador Vexthor breathed, his metallic appendages trembling. "After all this time." But Luna shook her head, studying the patterns in the light. "Not just a recording. Look at how it's responding to our presence. This is an interactive database, waiting for the right questions." Director Phyla's energy form expanded with excitement. "The mathematical patterns, they're a language. But not just of numbers, of music, of light, of vibration itself." Luna stepped forward, her hand outstretched toward the shimming display. As she moved, the images shifted, responding to her movements like ripples in a pond. "They left this for us, all of us. Not just the technology, but the understanding behind it." The images changed, showing vast ships moving between the galaxies, carrying what appeared to be entire civilizations. Then came darker images, something massive and ancient, lurking in the void between galaxy clusters, something that had frightened even the ancestors enough to make them flee. "They found something out there," Luna translated, reading the patterns of light and sound. "Something that made them realize they weren't as advanced as they thought. But instead of fighting it, they chose to evolve. To transcend their physical forms." "And they left us behind?" Vexthor asked, a note of betrayal in his mechanically modulated voice. "No," Luna corrected, watching as new images formed. "They left us a path to follow. But first, they wanted to make sure we were ready, that we understood the fundamental truths they had discovered." The light show shifted again, displaying what looked like a map of the galaxy, but overlaid with patterns of energy and resonance that Luna recognized from her study of the fountain's mechanics. "They found that the universe isn't just mathematical, it's musical. Every planet, every star, every galaxy plays its part in a cosmic symphony. Their technology wasn't about dominating nature, it was about joining the orchestra." Professor Exxon moved closer to the display, his temporal field synchronizing with the fountain's harmonics. The implications, if what you're saying is true, every theory we've developed about ancestral technology has been fundamentally flawed. Because you were looking for complexity, Luna explained, watching as the images showed more of the ancestors' journey. You were trying to bend the universe to your will, just like we humans once did. But the ancestors learned a better way. They learned to listen to the universe's own rhythms and work with them. The fountain's light suddenly concentrated, forming a single, brilliant point above their heads. Within it, mathematical equations and musical harmonies merged into something that seemed to bridge the gap between science and art, between technology and nature. This is what they wanted us to understand, Luna said softly. Not just how to build incredible machines, but why. Every piece of technology they left behind isn't just a tool, it's a lesson about harmony, about finding our place in the greater symphony of existence. Director Phyla's energy form pulsed with realization. The fountain isn't just a terraforming device or a database, it's a tuning fork. It's showing us how to align ourselves with the fundamental frequencies of the universe itself. Luna nodded, watching as new patterns emerged in the light. And now that we've proven we understand this first lesson, it's ready to show us the next step. The ancestors left behind more than just this fountain, they left a network of devices across the galaxy, each one teaching another part of their symphony. The map above them zoomed out, revealing dozens of points of light scattered across the galaxy, other installations, other devices, all waiting to be awakened by those who understood the simple truth behind their complexity. But there's something else, Luna said, her voice growing serious as she studied the emerging patterns. Something about why they left in such a hurry. These harmonics, they're not just about teaching us. They're a warning about what happens when you fall out of tune with the cosmic symphony. The delegates gathered closer as the fountain's display shifted one final time, revealing a truth that would change their understanding of not just the ancestors, but of their own place in the universe forever. The final images from the fountain's display faded into a soft, pulsing glow that seemed to beat in time with the hearts of those gathered around it. Luna stood in silence for a moment, letting the full weight of what they discovered sink in. They ran, Ambassador Vexthor said quietly, his metallic voice subdued, not from a physical enemy, but from what they saw themselves becoming. Luna nodded, watching the harmonious patterns still flowing through the fountain's crystalline structure. The ancestors reached a point where their technology had become so complex, so removed from the natural rhythms of the universe, that they were creating discord in the cosmic symphony. They weren't just risking their own civilization, they were disrupting the very fabric of spacetime itself. Director Phyla's energy form rippled thoughtfully. And so they chose to start over. To find a simpler way. Not simpler, Luna corrected, reaching out to touch the fountain's now warm surface. More harmonious. They learned to work with the universe's natural frequencies instead of fighting against them. And then they transcended their physical forms entirely, becoming part of the cosmic symphony they'd finally learned to hear. Professor Exxon's temporal field had stabilized completely, synchronizing with the fountain's rhythms. But why leave all this behind? Why not take their technology with them? Luna smiled, understanding flowing through her like the musical mathematics still humming in the air around them. Because they wanted to give us a choice. They left these installations across the galaxy as waypoints, as tutorials. Each one teaches a different aspect of their understanding, but only to those who are ready to learn it. The fountain's glow pulsed brighter for a moment, and new information cascaded through its display. Luna's eyes widened as she translated the patterns. Look at this, there are hundreds of these sites, each one waiting to be awakened. But they can only be activated in sequence, and only once we've truly understood the lesson of the previous one. And what is the lesson of this fountain? Vexthor asked, his skepticism finally replaced by genuine curiosity. That the simplest solution is often the most profound, Luna replied, gesturing to her humble hand crank that had achieved what centuries of advanced technology couldn't. That true advancement isn't about forcing our will upon the universe, but about learning to move in harmony with it. Director Phyla moved closer to the fountain, her energy form synchronizing with its pulses. The Council has been approaching this all wrong. We've been trying to master ancestral technology when we should have been trying to understand their wisdom. Exactly, Luna said, pulling up the galactic map one more time. Each of these sites is like a note in a greater song. Together, they'll teach us how to join the symphony the ancestors discovered. But first, we have to learn to listen. Professor Exxon's temporal field shimmered with excitement. This changes everything. Our entire approach to technological development, our understanding of physics itself. And that's exactly why the ancestors designed it this way, Luna explained, watching as her simple diagnostic tools continued to dance with readings that defied conventional physics. They wanted to make sure we were mature enough to handle the knowledge. Any civilization advanced enough to activate these sites would also have to be wise enough to understand why the ancestors abandoned their complex technologies in favor of universal harmony. The fountain's light began to shift again, but this time it was different. Instead of displaying information, it was changing the very atmosphere around them. The barren surface of Kepler 7 began to transform as the fountain's true purpose was finally fulfilled. It's not just teaching us, Luna breathed in wonder. It's showing us. The terraforming isn't about forcing change, it's about finding the planet's natural resonance and helping it express itself. Around them, crystalline structures began to pulse with life, and the dead soil beneath their feet stirred with the first seeds of renewal. The fountain wasn't just restoring the planet, it was helping it find its own song in the cosmic symphony. Ambassador Vexthor turned to Luna, his metallic form catching the light of 3 suns and the fountain's glow. The Council will want to establish research teams, to begin studying this site immediately. Luna held up her hand, smiling. With respect, Ambassador, I don't think that's what the ancestors intended. This isn't about study, it's about understanding. Each of us here has already learned more than any research team could discover, because we experienced it firsthand. She began packing up her tools, each one a testament to the power of simple solutions. I'd recommend leaving this site open to visitors from all species, all worlds. Let them come and see what happens when you approach the universe with humility instead of hubris. Let them learn what the ancestors wanted to teach us, that the path to the stars isn't about power or control, but about finding our place in the greater harmony of existence. As if in response to her words, the fountain's song swelled one final time, its harmonies reaching out to touch something deep within each being present. In that moment, they all understood what the ancestors had discovered, that the greatest technology isn't about mastery over nature, but about mastering ourselves enough to become part of nature's endless dance. Luna looked up at the fountain, now functioning perfectly for the first time in 50,000 years, and smiled. Sometimes the most profound discoveries come not from pushing boundaries, but from learning to see the boundaries as parts of a greater whole. The ancestors hadn't abandoned them, they had left them the greatest gift of all, the chance to learn this truth for themselves.